Hello, mucho gusto. So happy to be here. I want to talk to you today about the possibilities in Web3. And I want to start with where we began, where social began. And I want to put it to you that maybe those guys who started didn't think closely enough about the potential and possibilities of their creation and where it would lead to. And I was there, and choices were made to start collecting information, data, tracking, and it led to this place where we have this surveillance economy, right? And that needs to change, right? It's urgent that that changes, because social media is core to the way that we do business today, but it's also core to the way that we connect to each other, right? And I believe we can change that. And blockchain gives us the possibility to change that. And Polkadot gives us the possibility to change that. The way we see it, blockchain gives us the potential to take social networking away from these private companies and give it to people, all right? And start dismantling this surveillance economy that we have. So how do we get there? We propose a new protocol called DSNP. Our approach in thinking with this protocol is that it has to be an open protocol. It can't be a platform, right? Because a protocol discourages that collection of information, the way things have been built up today. It's on blockchain, right? So that it's a ledger that's open and available and free to everyone. On our protocol, you'll be able to access the social graph and messaging. New innovators, developers will be able to build companies that don't exist today, right? Because of this open protocol. And finally, maybe not finally, one other thing I want to tell you about DSNP. It is tokenless, it is free, and it is open source, okay? And one of the reasons that we're approaching it that way is because we want to make sure that we do not recreate the world that we're in right now. So let me tell you about how we got there. Because how we build this healthier web is as important as why we are doing it. I want to tell you about what we've learned in the process of developing this new web, and hopefully approaching it in a different way, right? So that we're not repeating the same mistakes from the past. What we learned in the process of creating DSNP was this idea that we should declare first, offer critiques and solutions and ideas, and then specify. Specify the execution and decision-making guidelines for these ideas, new ideas and approaches we're proposing. And going back and forth between the two, right? It's a cycle. It's a cycle of declaration and specification. And it's a cycle of declaration and specification that walks along three specific paths, right? These are the three specific paths that we found were the most important to make sure that we are developing this approach in the way that we want. It starts with our principles, then the people, and then our process. So let me get specific, right, on where we started with DSNP. We started with DSNP with a set of design principles, 8 design principles that our founders, Braxton and Harry, researched, right? Principles around privacy, autonomy, portability. Those were articulated and documented and shared with our tech team. Those became specifications in our white paper for DSNP. It shows up in 6 core aspects of DSNP around extensibility, usability, portability, and so on. So when we went through this process, right, of declaration and specification in creating our white paper for DSNP, we realized that we needed to extend this to the whole way that we create software, the products that we build, the services that we create, how do we make sure that those principles show up in everything that we do? We realized that the principles were the core, and as technologists, we were not the experts in how to make sure those principles came from our original idea, to the products that we created. And I have to say, we know that, right? We've seen the best intentions declared by so many tech companies, and we've seen them fail, right? And again, we did not want to repeat that. So we realized that the main thing we had to do to make sure that our principles appeared is get the right people on our team. So through an initiative that we're part of called Project Liberty, we're working with impact organizations, we're working with McCourt Institute, which includes Georgetown and Sciences Po. We got access to different minds, right? The purpose of Project Liberty is to create a new civic architecture for a new digital age. And through Project Liberty, we got access to a set of ethicists at Georgetown who helped us take a look at these principles. One of the first things that they did when they came in and we started talking, I'll say this, right? Our idea was, we'll talk to Georgetown, we'll include them in some sprints, they'll tell us what to do, we'll be fine, right? That's not what happened. They came in and they told us that what we had was way too abstract to actually apply to the work that we do, right? We didn't have a good way of communicating it to our entire team. We had to fix all of that. And we had to make sure that everybody knew how to act on the principles that we were defining. So their guidance was for us to create an ethics white paper, for us to document, explore, expand our ideas, and share them with the team. In that ethics white paper, we're able to define our values, the work that we do, and our action guiding principles. Our action guiding principles being user data control, freedom of expression, distribution of power, transparency, and adaptability. So once we went through that process of building out the white paper with that team, we felt like we were in a place to start activating and applying the principles to the work that we do. I want to summarize for you everything that we learned in that process, right? First of all, the principles. The thing that we learned was it's incredibly important to establish our foundational principles. Principles that will not deviate, will not change, but also create a framework for those principles to be reflected upon and evolve as we add to the products that we create and the community that's involved. We learned to avoid bumper stickers. So we learned that all of the things that we define as principles have to be explored and defined so everyone understands how they apply to their work. What we learned about the people was to be intentional. By including a wide variety of people in our project, we added new voices to the work that we're doing, and that changed the work that we do. So the second thing we learned was around recognizing the impact of adding new people into the project. Adding new ideas, adding non-technologists, it can slow down your process, it will change the way you work, and it will allow you to include expertise, knowledge, and varied backgrounds that you may not initially incorporate if you're just working with a technology team. The last thing I learned about in this process about working with the people is to be humble, right? As I said, when social networking started, I think technologists thought they had all of the answers, right? And I think one of the things that came out of our work is understanding that including other people exposes us to ideas that are important and applicable that we would never have access to if we didn't add them in. And the last thing I'll mention is it's important to practice humility. Be humble, right? We don't know everything. Finally, in terms of the process, what we learned was, as I said, declare your work and then specify. The declaration is around the declaration is around exposing the critiques that you have, and then the specification is to tell your team how to apply that. Break the cycle and question everything. And finally, the process itself has to be strong enough, flexible enough to allow you to modify, reflect, and change your foundational principles. Now, with this knowledge, we're ready to move on to the next phase of our work. The next phase of our work is to bring our decentralized social networking to scale. And this is where Polkadot comes in. Because one of the things that we know about social networking is that it can't just be moved wholesale, right? From the Web 2 world that we're in into blockchain. The transactions, the volatility of the cost of blockchain connections will, the cost and volatility of blockchain connections will overwhelm any project, right? Once it moves into the blockchain. So our approach here was to examine up to 30 blockchains and come up with a new approach to resolve this issue, right? We recognize that, as I said before, we do not have the capability. As I said before, we recognize that the network that we create, the protocol that we create should be free and open, right? The network that we create to support it has to support the scale of that protocol that we're bringing. So when we examined up those 30 blockchains, we were looking for a few things, right? We wanted to make sure that those blockchains aligned with the principles that we identified that mattered to us, as well as could support the scale that we wanted to manage with transmitting messages in a social network. So how do we do that? Our team came up with a whole new idea around this, and we're building a blockchain to support this on the Polkadot network. This new blockchain, this new parachain, is called frequency. Frequency introduces the idea of capacity. The purpose of capacity is to shift the economic model so that rather than having messaging being a high volatility, high cost operation, it becomes a managed resource. The idea that our team struck upon when designing and investigating Polkadot and designing frequency was this idea of capacity, right? So because our blockchain is designed to support messaging rather than financial transactions, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for how we can design the economic model. The idea that our tech team came up with was this idea of capacity, whereby staking a developer has access to a certain amount of capacity on the chain in order to send their messages. The capacity itself refreshes on an epoch basis, right? So that capacity is always available for delivering messaging off of the chain. We think that this is the most important project of our time. This will allow us to embed social functionality into the very web itself. So please join us. Take a look at frequency.xyz. Join us on Twitter and learn more about our new parachain. Thank you.